Amos Tversky of Stanford University and Daniel Kahneman of the University of California, Berkeley are two of the world's leading researchers studying how and why people make illogical choices. Maybe we can begin with the big question. What contribution has psychology made to our understanding of judgment and decision-making?
There are two approaches to the study of decision-making. One, which has been called normative, asks a question of how we ought to make decisions. What is the nature of rational decision-making? The second approach, which we call descriptive, asks not how decisions ought to be made, but how they are actually being made in practice.
Well, the major theme of psychological research, as it turns out, is that the normative model of rational and coherent decision-making isn't a terrific model of how people actually make judgments and decisions. When people are put to the test, then it turns out that although their intuitions are often correct, they're also often systematically wrong in ways that are predictable and are quite systematic.
Now tell me, how are we going to prove to our audience that they're not as logical as they think they are, that their everyday thinking often departs from these normative rules of rationality?
Well, actually, it doesn't take very complicated questions. We use quite simple questions about which people have some intuitions and impressions, and we can compare the way that people approach these questions to the way that they should approach them.
And while you try to solve the problems, we'll also show you some of the responses of people we taped earlier. Okay, first we have two questions which have to do with making judgments. Number one, are there more words in the English language that begin with the letter K, or words in which K is the third letter? K first or K third?
I think that there's probably more words with the letter K as the third letter.
I think it's more of the first letter.
I'll go for the first letter. I would assume they begin with K.
Okay, question number two. Imagine that you're about to spend a month in the Middle East. Which would you worry about more, a terrorist attack or a traffic accident?
Terrorist attack.
Terrorist attack.
Terrorist attack.
Danny, are they right?
No, they're actually wrong in both cases. There are twice as many English words that have K in the third position than words that begin with a K. And if you go to the Middle East, you should really be much more worried about getting hurt in a traffic accident than getting hurt by a terrorist attack. There are simply many, many more of those.
The responses to these questions illustrate a very general principle that people use in reasoning under condition of uncertainty, which we call the availability heuristic. Obviously, people do not know how many English words start with the letter K as opposed to words that have K in the third position. So how would they answer a question of that kind? What they do, we suggest, is they try to imagine examples of words that start with a K, such as key, what have you, and try to think about words that have K in the third position. Now, because it's much easier to think of words that start with a given letter than words that have that letter in the third position, they come with the impression that there are many more of them.
Danny, how does this notion of the availability heuristic help us understand the Middle East example?
Well, again, it's the same thing. We assess the probability or the likelihood of an event by the ease with which instances come to mind. Well, when you think of the Middle East, you think of terrorist attacks, and you don't think of traffic accidents. And as a result, you are quite likely to worry much more about terrorist attacks than about traffic accidents, which is probably quite unjustified.